The sun had just begun to slip behind the distant hills when Emma Hale drove up the winding gravel road that led to the family's orchard. The old farmhouse stood ahead like a memory she wasn't sure she wanted to remember, white paint fatting. The porch slanted just enough to remind her of time, and the wind whispering through the trees like an old secret. She slowed her car near the edge of the property, rolling down her window to breathe in the scent she had missed for almost a year: apples, damp soil, and something sweet that always reminded her of childhood. But this time, it carried something heavier, something that didn't smell like home anymore. Her fingers tightened on the steering wheel. She wasn't just coming back for nostalgia. She was coming back for truth, and she already suspected it would hurt. Inside the farmhouse, her mother, Claire Hale, was sitting at the kitchen table, hunched over the family ledger, the same book Emma had once believed contained the heartbeat of the orchard. Every harvest, every sale, every drop of cider, all of it had lived in that book. But now, it looked less like a record and more like a confession. Claire looked up when Emma stepped inside. Her once warm face had grown tired, her sharp blue eyes dulled by sleepless nights. "Emma," she said quietly, "you're home early." Emma smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. "I needed to see the harvest." It was a lie, but one her mother didn't question. Claire had learned not to ask too many questions lately. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon tea and dust. A single light bulb hung from the ceiling, its glow weak and trembling. Emma noticed how the wallpaper peeled near the windows, how the once polished wooden counters looked neglected. Even the house seemed to know something had changed. Her mother closed the ledger and placed a hand on top of it, like she was protecting it. "You should have called. Luke's not home yet." Of course, Luke Hale, her older brother. The town's favorite son, the charming one, the problem solver. Everyone loved Luke. He had inherited their late father's easy confidence and warm smile, the kind that could make people forget his flaws. But Emma remembered his flaws all too well. She hadn't planned on staying long, just long enough to see for herself what she already suspected, that Luke was in over his head. When he finally arrived that evening, his pickup truck roared up the driveway, kicking up a cloud of dust that glowed orange in the fatting sun. He stepped out, still wearing the same brown jacket he'd worn for years, but now there was a sharpness to his face, a tension in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Em," he said, opening his arms wide. "Look at you, back from the city, huh?" "Yeah," she said, managing a small smile. "I missed home." He hugged her, quick, performative, the kind of hug people give when they're trying to hide guilt. Dinner that night was quiet. The three of them sat around the table like strangers sharing a secret. The meal was simple: chicken, cornbread, and boiled potatoes, but no one tasted it. Every conversation felt rehearsed, every silence too long. "So," Claire began, forcing a cheerful tone, "how's the city life treating you, Emma?" "It's fine," Emma said. "Busy, different." Luke chuckled. "Different as in boring, right? Bet you missed this place more than you thought." Emma shrugged. "Something like that." There was a flicker of tension, a static in the air that none of them addressed. When Claire mentioned the orchard's debts, Luke's jaw tightened. "We'll figure it out," he said quickly, his voice firm but nervous. "I've got plans, just need a little more time." Emma glanced at her mother, who nodded softly as if she wanted to believe him, as if believing him was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. But Emma knew that tone in Luke's voice. It was the same one he used when he was covering something up. After dinner, Emma slipped into the old office where the family kept their records. The shelves were lined with binders, receipts, and years of harvest logs. Dust blanketed everything, except one thing: the ledger on the desk. She opened it. At first it looked normal: dates, amounts, product sales, but halfway through she found something strange. A page torn out, another scribbled over, and then, tucked inside the back cover, a folded document she didn't recognize. It was a contract of sale, for part of the orchard's western land, signed, sealed, dated 6 months ago. Her blood ran cold. She recognized the signature: Luke Hale. Emma's eyes widened as she scanned the details. He had sold nearly a quarter of the orchard, the very land their grandfather had planted himself, to a local developer. And the worst part, the payment had gone into Luke's personal account. She covered her mouth, trembling. Her brother hadn't just made a bad business deal. He had betrayed their family. The next morning, she confronted her mother. Claire looked confused, then pale. "That's not possible," she whispered. "He wouldn't do that." "He did, Mom. I found the papers." Claire sat down heavily. "There has to be an explanation. Maybe he borrowed the money for the orchard." "Then why did he hide it?" Emma shot back. "Why didn't he tell us?" Her mother didn't answer. She simply stared out the window at the orchard, where rows of apple trees swayed under a golden sunrise, peaceful, beautiful, and full of lies. Later that afternoon, Emma drove to the county office to confirm what she'd found. The clerk there pulled up the property records. Sure enough, the western lot of Hale Orchards had been transferred to a corporation from out of town. The buyer's representative had signed the deal personally, with Luke Hale's name right beside it. Emma felt sick. On her way back home, she stopped her car at the edge of the orchard and stared at the rows of trees. Their branches bent low with fruit, red and perfect, but she saw them differently now, like witnesses to a betrayal they couldn't speak of. That night, Emma didn't sleep. She lay awake, listening to the creaks of the old house and the soft hum of wind against the windows. Her mind raced through every memory of Luke, the way he used to protect her, how he'd always been the hero of the family. But maybe that was the problem. Maybe he'd believed his own legend for too long. By morning, she made her decision. She wasn't going to confront him with anger, not yet. She was going to gather proof. Over the next few weeks, she stayed on the farm, pretending to help with the harvest. She volunteered at the co-op, visited banks, and quietly gathered every record she could find. What she discovered was worse than she expected. Luke had been taking out loans in the orchard's name. He had redirected payments from suppliers. And he had used the orchard's assets as collateral for personal ventures, all without telling Claire or Emma. It wasn't just a mistake, it was deliberate. Emma's anger turned into focus. Revenge, she realized, didn't always come with fire and fury. Sometimes it came with paperwork and patience. She began copying every document, every receipt, every transfer. She built a folder of evidence thicker than any harvest log. When she finally felt ready, she called someone from her past, Sarah Lind, an old high school friend who now worked as a reporter at the local paper. "I've got a story for you," Emma said over the phone, her voice steady. "But it's not just a story, it's a truth that's been buried." Sarah hesitated. "About who?" "About my brother," Emma said, "and what he's done to our family's orchard." The air in the orchard that night was heavy with change. The crickets sang in the distance. Claire sat on the porch, sipping tea, trying to ignore the worry that clung to her heart. Luke was inside, packing, phone pressed to his ear, whispering in tones that carried guilt. And Emma, she sat at the kitchen table, staring at the ledger one last time. The same ledger her father had once called the soul of the orchard. She realized now that the soul had been poisoned, not by drought or disease, but by greed. She closed the book, locked the folder of evidence in her bag, and whispered softly to herself, "Tomorrow it begins." Because revenge wasn't always about destruction. Sometimes it was about revelation. And by morning, the orchard would start whispering the truth it had held for far too long. Morning came quietly, but the orchard didn't feel the same. The wind carried an unease that made the leaves tremble as if the trees themselves knew something was about to break. Emma Hale sat at the kitchen table with her coffee untouched. Her bag lay beside her chair, the folder of evidence neatly packed inside, receipts, contracts, bank statements, everything. Today wasn't about gathering anymore. It was about acting. Her mother, Claire, watched from across the room, her eyes sunken and fearful. "Emma, please," she whispered. "Whatever you're doing, don't make it worse. He's still your brother." Emma looked up. "Mom, he sold our land. He stole from us. You can't keep pretending he's the boy who used to pick apples and hum songs on the tractor." Claire pressed her lips together, tears forming. He's made mistakes, but this will destroy us. Emma's expression hardened. No, Mom, he already did that. I'm just showing people what he's done. She stood, grabbed her bag, and walked out before Claire could say another word. The Ashwood County Gazette office was small, but the story it was about to publish would be anything but. When Emma walked in, her friend Sarah Lynde met her with cautious eyes. You sure you want to do this? Sarah asked, closing the door behind her. I've never been surer of anything, Emma said, setting the folder on the desk. Sarah flipped through the documents, her face changing with every page, disbelief, anger, then quiet sadness. This is a scandal, Emma. He signed everything himself. Every contract, Emma said. Every loan. He used fake project names, told my mom it was all for equipment upgrades. Sarah sighed and sat back. Once this goes out, there's no going back. He'll lose his reputation. The town loves Luke Hale. Emma's tone was sharp. Then maybe they should know who they've been loving. Sarah studied her friend's face for a long moment. Okay, she finally said. I'll write it, but I'll give you time. The story runs Monday morning. You should tell your family before it hits. Emma nodded. I will. But she didn't mean it. Sunday night passed like thunder behind clouds, silent but heavy. By sunrise Monday, the Gazette hit stands across town with a front-page headline that froze every local coffee shop in mid-conversation. Local hero, Luke Hale under investigation. Family land sold in secret deals. The photo beneath the headline was of Luke and Claire, smiling in front of the orchard gates. The contrast between that joy and the headline's betrayal made people gasp. By 8:00 a.m., the phones at the Hale farmhouse were ringing nonstop. Reporters, neighbors, old friends asking what happened. Claire was in tears, clutching the paper as if she could squeeze the story away. Oh God, what have you done, Emma? What I had to, Emma said quietly. The world needed to see what he's done before he ruins this family completely. Luke came storming in minutes later, his face red with fury. You, he shouted, slamming the newspaper on the counter. You told them, you went behind my back. Emma stood tall. I told the truth, Luke, that's all. You think you're some kind of savior, he yelled. You've just killed our name. Do you have any idea what you've done? You killed it the moment you forged those papers, Emma snapped back. The argument escalated like lightning, fast, fierce, and blinding. Claire tried to step between them, her voice breaking, but the damage was done. Luke pointed at Emma, trembling with rage. You think this makes you righteous. You don't know what I've been through. You don't understand why I did it. Then tell me, she demanded. Tell me why you sold Grandpa's land, Luke, why you lied to Mom, to everyone. Luke's breath came heavy. For a moment, his anger faltered, replaced by guilt. Because I was trying to save it, he said finally, his voice cracking. The orchard, been dying, Emma. The debts, the taxes, the droughts, I sold part of the land to cover what Dad left behind. I didn't steal, I was desperate. Emma's voice softened slightly, but only slightly. Then why didn't you tell us? Why hide it? Why put the money in your account? He looked away. Because if Mom found out, she'd never trust me again. And you, he glared at her, you'd never believe I was trying to help. Emma took a step closer, her tone cutting through him. You're right, because help doesn't come from lies. Luke slammed his fist on the counter and stormed out of the house, leaving the door hanging open behind him. Outside, news vans were already pulling up. The quiet orchard had turned into a storm. Within days, county officials launched an inquiry into the orchard's finances. Local stations ran the story nightly. Reporters swarmed the property, snapping photos of the farmhouse, the fields, and Claire, who barely spoke anymore. Luke avoided everyone, hiding out in a motel across town. Emma cooperated with investigators, turning over every document she had. Though her anger burned bright, she couldn't escape the guilt creeping in. Watching her mother cry in silence each night made her question whether she'd done the right thing the right way. One evening, as the sun bled red across the orchard, Sarah came by with an update. They're opening a case, she said. It's going to court next month. Emma nodded slowly. He'll have to face what he did. Sarah hesitated. You know, people in town are talking. Half think you're brave. Half think you've destroyed your own family. Emma stared out the window, her reflection warped in the glass. Let them talk. Truth doesn't need everyone's approval. The Ashwood County courthouse was small, but that morning it felt like the whole world was watching. The benches filled with neighbors, old friends, and curious locals. At the front sat Luke Hale, head down, face pale, suit slightly wrinkled. Emma sat behind the prosecutor's table, silent but steady. She wasn't a witness today. She was the reason the case existed. When the proceedings began, the air thickened. The prosecutor laid out the evidence, the secret sale contracts, the misdirected payments, the unpaid taxes. Luke's defense argued desperation, not deceit, claiming he sold the land to keep the family afloat. But then came the moment that shattered any sympathy left in the room. Mr. Hale, the prosecutor asked, holding up a document, is this your signature on the transfer of funds, the one that placed $147,000 into your personal bank account? Luke hesitated, eyes flicking toward Emma. Then he nodded slowly. Yes. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Claire covered her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. Emma looked away, heartbreaking despite herself. She had wanted truth, not destruction, but now both were happening at once. When the session ended, Luke was released on bond, his name officially tied to fraud and breach of trust. Outside, reporters swarmed. Flashbulbs popped, questions flew. Emma, how do you feel exposing your own brother? Do you think justice was served? Is the Hale family finished? Emma paused, her face calm despite the chaos. I didn't destroy my family, she said softly. Lies did. I just stopped pretending they didn't exist. The quote ran on every station that night. In the weeks that followed, Ashwood County buzzed with opinions. Some called Emma brave, others called her cruel. The orchard's business plummeted. Customers stopped visiting, unsure which side they stood on. Claire spent most days indoors, refusing to go into town. She loved both her children but didn't know how to hold them together anymore. Luke vanished from the headlines, but not from Emma's mind. Despite everything, part of her still remembered the brother who used to lift her onto the apple-picking ladder when she was too small to reach. The one who used to joke that they'd run the orchard together one day. Now the orchard stood like a battlefield, silent, scarred, and waiting for something to grow again. One evening, Sarah came by again holding a thin envelope. The developer who bought the land, she said quietly, is backing out. Too much bad press. They're willing to return the deed for a price. Emma's eyes widened. How much? $75,000. Emma laughed bitterly. We barely have 700. Sarah smiled faintly. Then you'll have to get creative. Emma looked out at the orchard, its leaves whispering in the dying light. She had exposed her brother. She had spoken truth. But the orchard, their legacy, was still bleeding. And for the first time since this all began, she realized revenge wasn't enough. Now she needed redemption. The orchard was quiet again, too quiet. It had been 4 months since the court case ended, and Hale Orchards no longer felt like home. It felt like an echo. The trees still bloomed, but the laughter that once filled the rows had long vanished. Emma Hale walked between the rows with her hands in her coat pockets, the cold October wind tugging at her hair. Every leaf that fell reminded her of something lost: trust, peace, family. She stopped by the old barn where the faded sign still read Hale Orchards. Since 1954. The wood was cracked, the paint chipped, but she couldn't bring herself to take it down. It wasn't just a name. It was her family's story, both the beautiful and the broken parts. Inside the barn, her mother sat at a small table, sorting through letters. Most were bills or legal notices, but one envelope caught Emma's eye. It was from Luke. Claire noticed her staring. He's in Denver now, she said softly. Staying with a friend. He says he's looking for work. Emma nodded, emotion flickering across her face. Has he said anything about what happened? Her mother sighed. He says he wishes things could have been different, that's all. Emma looked away. Yeah, me too. The room fell silent, except for the soft creak of the barn's rafters. Claire set down the letter and looked at her daughter. I know what he did was wrong, Emma, but I also know this anger you carry, it's heavy. Don't let it bury you. Emma didn't answer. She just looked out toward the orchard, where the last of the apples glowed red in the pale sunlight. Later that week, Emma sat at the edge of the orchard with Sarah, who had come by after finishing another story for the Gazette. So, Sarah said, kicking at the dirt with her boot, what's next for you? You going back to the city? Emma shook her head. No, I'm staying. Sarah raised a brow. Here, with everything that's happened. Emma smiled faintly. Because of everything that's happened, this orchard is still ours, Sarah. It's bruised, but it's not dead. I'm not letting his mistakes define what we built. Sarah nodded slowly. You're stronger than most, you know that. Not stronger, Emma said quietly. Just tired of running from the truth. Over the next few months, Emma poured her energy into rebuilding. She fixed old fences, repainted the farmhouse, and reopened the small fruit stand by the roadside, the same one she and Luke had run as kids. She called it the Bitter Orchard Market. The name made people curious, and slowly customers began to return. But the orchard needed more than just business. It needed heart. Emma reached out to local farms, forming partnerships. She hosted weekend picking events for families, offered tour for schools, and even started a small cider festival. Each new idea brought a spark back to the land. Still, every night, when the day's work was done, she felt the ache of unfinished business. She still hadn't spoken to Luke. One morning in late November, a letter arrived. The handwriting was unmistakable. Emma, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I can't blame you. I've spent these months trying to figure out what kind of man I became, and I don't like the answer. You were right. I lied. I thought I could fix everything by myself, and instead I broke everything that mattered. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'd like to see the orchard again one last time, if you'll let me know. Emma stared at the letter for a long time. Her first instinct was to burn it, but something inside her, maybe the echo of all those years of laughter under the trees, stopped her. That evening, she sent him a text. Come tomorrow, early morning, before the workers arrive. The next morning was cold and misty. Dew clung to the apple trees like glass beads. When Luke's truck pulled into the driveway, Emma was already outside, pruning branches. He stepped out slowly, thinner than she remembered, with shadows under his eyes and humility in his step. Hey, he said quietly. Hey. For a long moment, neither spoke. The orchard hummed softly around them, a reminder of both their roots and their ruin. You've been busy, Luke said, glancing around. The fences were new, the trees healthier. It looks good. Better than before, Emma said. The community helped. He nodded, swallowing hard. I saw the pictures online. You did all this. We did, she corrected. This orchard still has your name on it. He looked down. Doesn't feel like it anymore. Emma wiped her hands on her jeans. You hurt us, Luke. You hurt Mom, you hurt me. But I didn't do all this to erase you. I did it to make sure what Dad built didn't die because of us. Luke's eyes shimmered with regret. I was stupid. I thought I had to be the one to fix everything to prove I was worthy of Dad's trust. When the debts piled up, I panicked. I thought selling that land would save us. Emma's voice softened. It almost destroyed us instead. He nodded, silent tears forming. I know, and I'll never forgive myself for it. Emma took a deep breath. You don't need my forgiveness to start over, but if you're here to help, really help, I won't turn you away. He looked up surprised. You'd let me stay. For the orchard's sake, she said quietly. Not yours, not yet. Over the next few weeks, Luke began working quietly under Emma's supervision. He repaired irrigation lines, trimmed branches, and helped organize the winter shipments. The workers eyed him cautiously at first, but his humility spoke louder than his past. One day, as they stood side by side in the field, he looked at Emma and said, You know, I used to think this orchard was cursed. Every year something went wrong, a storm, a drought, a debt. But now I see maybe it wasn't cursed. Maybe it was just waiting for the truth. Emma smiled faintly. Maybe it still is. They worked in silence for a while before Luke added, "You were brave, you know, doing what you did. I hated you for it, but you saved us from worse." Emma met his gaze. "I didn't want revenge, Luke. Not really. I just wanted to stop living in a lie." "And now?" he asked. She looked out at the orchard, glowing gold under the winter sun. "Now I just want peace." By spring, the bitter orchard market was thriving. The town that once whispered in gossip now came in droves, not for scandal, but for cider, pies, and forgiveness. Emma organized a harvest renewal festival, inviting everyone who'd once turned their backs. The event was small but joyful, laughter, music, and the scent of baked apples filled the air. During the festival, Emma took the stage to thank everyone. Her mother stood nearby, smiling for the first time in a long time. And when she called Luke up to join her, a hush fell over the crowd. He stepped forward, hesitant, his voice trembling as he took the microphone. "I don't deserve this," he began, "but I'm grateful for it. I made mistakes that nearly cost us everything. But my sister, she didn't let hate win. She chose truth. She chose to rebuild. And because of that, this orchard still stands." The crowd applauded softly, a gesture not of admiration, but of acceptance. Claire wiped her tears, Emma smiled, and for the first time in years, the orchard didn't feel heavy. It felt alive. That evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, Emma walked alone through the rows of trees. The wind whispered through the leaves, carrying the faint echo of her father's voice, or maybe it was just memory. She stopped by the oldest tree in the orchard, the one her grandfather had planted first. Its bark was scarred, its branches knotted, but it still bore fruit. She placed her hand against it and whispered, "We're okay now." Behind her, Luke approached quietly. "You talking to the trees again?" Emma smiled. "Maybe they're the only ones who understand." He chuckled softly. "Then tell them thank you for forgiving us." They stood together in silence, watching the last light fade across the orchard. And though the past would never vanish completely, the bitterness had turned into something else, something honest. A new season had come. The orchard had survived. And so had they.